Everyone thinks being a gladiator was cool. The crowd cheering your name. The glory, the fame, about that. Because the reality of being a Roman gladiator was nothing like the movies. It was smelly. It was painful. It was humiliating. And there was a very good chance you were going to die in front of 50,000 strangers who paid money to watch it happen. Not because they hated you, but because watching men fight to the death was one of Rome's favorite forms of entertainment. To the crowd, you were the main event. To yourself, you were just trying to survive another day. Welcome to the most overrated job in human history. This is why it sucked to be a Roman gladiator. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to be very grateful you were born when you were. Because no matter how bad your job is, your boss probably isn't expecting you to fight another employee to the death before lunch. Being a gladiator wasn't about honor. It wasn't about freedom. It wasn't even about becoming a hero. For most men, it was simply about staying alive long enough to see another sunrise. And that was a battle most of them eventually lost. Here is the first thing nobody tells you about gladiators. Most of them didn't choose this. You think these guys woke up one morning and said, "Yeah, I want to fight for my life while thousands of people eat snacks and watch." Well, most gladiators were slaves, or prisoners of war, or
Fresh
criminals
figs
who
from
had
the
literally
south.
no other option.
Excellent quality.
The Roman legal system had a special punishment, condemned to the gladiatorial school. Translation: you did something wrong and now you fight for entertainment until you die. Great justice system, Rome.
Tell
Now
me the
technically,
truth.
some free men did volunteer. But most of them weren't chasing glory. Many were drowning in debt. Others simply had no better choice. But when you signed up, you legally gave up all your rights. Every single one. You were now property of your trainer. He decided when you ate, when you slept, when you trained, when you fought. There was no quitting, no changing your mind. Once those gates closed behind you, your old life was over. Slave or volunteer, the result was basically the same. You were trapped, and from that moment on, every fight could be your last. Your new home is essentially a prison. Stone cells barely big enough to lie down in. Iron bars on the door. Guards watching you constantly. Escape wasn't really an option. If you tried, the punishment was usually far worse than staying. The training was absolutely brutal. You woke up before sunrise every single day. Sword drills, shield work, running, more sword drills, then more running, day after day, week after week. Your trainer was not a nice man. He was basically a prison warden and sports coach combined, who genuinely did not care about your feelings. His job wasn't to make you comfortable. His job was to make sure you survived long enough to earn him money. What did you eat? Barley. Mostly barley. Historians found gladiator remains and discovered their diet was almost entirely grain and beans. They were called the barley men, because apparently when you're training someone to fight to the death, you feed them like a farm animal. The one silver lining: you got actual medical care. Roman doctors became surprisingly skilled at treating gladiators, because you were an expensive investment, which sounds great, until you remember why they needed doctors in the first place. Here is something that will genuinely surprise you. Despite being famous, despite being cheered by thousands of people, despite being the ancient equivalent of a celebrity athlete, gladiators were considered the lowest of the low in Roman society. Below slaves low. They had a legal status called infamia, meaning disgrace, could not vote, could not hold public office, could not testify in court, could not be buried in a normal cemetery. Romans loved watching gladiators. They just didn't want to be associated with one. Imagine being famous enough that people put your face on cups and plates across the entire empire. And also being so disgraced that respectable citizens wouldn't shake your hand. That was the gladiator life. The crowd would scream your name, and then go home and tell their children never to become you. You were celebrated inside the arena, but ignored outside of it. Famous enough for everyone to know your name, yet respected by almost no one. That was the strange contradiction of being a Roman gladiator. Fight day has arrived. How are you feeling? Terrified. But that's accurate. The night before a fight, gladiators were given an enormous public banquet. Sounds nice, right? It was not nice, because everyone in Rome knew what this banquet was. The last meal. Spectators actually came to watch the banquet, staring at the gladiators, studying their faces, deciding who was going to survive tomorrow. Some even placed bets before the fight had begun. The next morning you were armed depending on your type. The murmillo, heavy helmet and short sword. The retiarius, net and trident, basically fighting with fishing equipment. The thraex, curved blade. Each type matched against a specific opponent, like a very violent game of rock, paper, scissors. except losing meant dying. You were then paraded through the city streets to the arena. Crowds lining every road watching you pass. Some cheering, some silent, some hoping to witness a great fight. All of them knowing something you were trying very hard not to think about. Not everyone walking into that arena today was going to walk back out. The roar of 50,000 people hits you like a wall of sound. Sand beneath your feet, sun overhead, and somewhere across the arena, a man whose entire job today is to defeat you. Here is what movies always get wrong. Gladiator fights were not just two men swinging wildly until one fell down. Roman gladiatorial combat was highly technical. Gladiators trained for years. They studied opponents. They had strategies, closer to martial arts than a street brawl. Every move mattered. Every mistake could cost you your life. The fights were also refereed as actual referees. If a gladiator signaled surrender by raising a finger, the fight would pause, and then the crowd decided what happened next. The crowd liked you. If you entertained them sufficiently, they might spare you. If they didn't, the referee stepped back, and the winning gladiator stepped forward. Your entire survival depended on whether 50,000 strangers enjoyed your performance enough to let you live. No pressure. So how dangerous was this actually? Historians have studied Roman records, and gladiatorial remains extensively. The results are not great. Early in Roman history, fights almost always ended in death. One fighter won. One fighter died. Simple. But over time, Romans became more practical. Dead gladiators were expensive to replace. Training one took years. So by the height of the empire, historians estimate only about 1 in 10 fights actually ended in death. Which sounds much better, until you do the math. A gladiator might fight 3 or 4 times per year, over a career of several years. That is a lot of fights, and a lot of chances for that 1 in 10 to come up. The average gladiator career lasted only 2 to 3 years before death or serious injury ended it. The lucky ones who survived long enough could earn their freedom. A wooden sword called a rudis symbolized that freedom. Some gladiators became so popular they were given freedom, and still chose to keep fighting, because the money was extraordinary, because the fame was addictive, and because after years of training, what else were you going to do? Plant barley. So was it all bad? Honestly, yes, you could become famous. Yes, you could earn money. But you lived in a prison cell. You ate barley every day. Society considered you disgraced. And your life was literally in the hands of a crowd eating lunch in the stands. So next time you think being a Roman gladiator sounds cool, remember the barley. Remember the stone cell. Remember the 50,000 strangers holding your life in their hands. And be very grateful that your job performance review doesn't end with a sword.